Hi guys, how's it going? Avishai here with another episode of What Israel Is. And this week we have a double whammy. I have a rather relaxed week, and so I can allow myself to do 2 episodes. So, our past 2 episodes were about Islam and more specifically about Sunni Islam and the world of Sunni Islam. Now that is supposedly not about Israel really, but it really is. And I feel that it is, well, for one thing you need to understand is that a fifth of Israeli citizens are Arabs, the majority of which are Muslims, and the majority of which are Sunni Muslims. And in as much as discussing the history of Judaism and what Judaism is in Israel, I feel it is necessary to also discuss what Islam is and the way it is right now and how it converses with Arab governments. So in that way, if we discuss those things, we can come to some understanding of the forces at play, both in this area and in the grander scheme of things in the Middle East. So that's that. And so why discuss history at all? And is history a relevant thing? It is, and it also isn't. It is absolutely essential if you want to understand the historical context to what is happening now. It can also teach you about the mindset of the people who are part of the conflict. And I'm saying this about the conflict, but it's also relevant to things outside of the conflict. It's relevant to all historical learning. So it's absolutely important in that respect, but it is a hindrance as well. It is a hindrance once you get to talking about resolutions. When you start with debating history, when you should be discussing possible fair resolutions, it's a problem when people start bringing up old grievances. That is not to say that grievances, however old they are have no merit. I think I would be the last person to argue that. But policy and justice are not the same thing. And as horrible as it may sound, the truth of the matter is that for some things there will never be true justice, especially when we're talking about past grievances. Some circles do not close, and I feel this is the case as far as the treatment of Jews at the hands of the church, and not just the church, but also Christians at large. It is probably also the case as far as the treatment of Jews by Muslims. It is the case of the treatment of the Native Americans by the colonialists from Europe. It is the case of the treatment of Africans at the hand of colonialists from Europe. We can't expect those things to come full circle. We can't expect recompense in a grand historical sense of things. We can expect a brighter future. So, let's go back a bit. We're talking about the discussing history and how it could be a hindrance to practical resolution. I don't feel that talks of who was here first, or how long is too long, or any theoretical or historical or whatever discussion of the Palestinians and the Jews is particularly helpful to producing a long-lasting peace settlement. And but it is again important to know your history so that you'll have an understanding of who's who and why. Okay, and in that brain, our topic today is it apartheid? Bam. Is it apartheid? For those of you who are not in the know, the policies of Israel have often, among radical left in Europe and in the United States, North America rather, drawn comparison to apartheid. Now, what is apartheid to begin with? If I were to try to disavow you of this notion, I would suppose it would only be helpful to first delve into what it actually means. So, apartheid, or rather apartheid, is an Afrikaans word for segregation, literally apartheid. It arose from South Africa, and it was essentially a government policy. What did it mean? Apartheid was a government policy of, as the name suggests, forced segregation. So the way we could see apartheid in day-to-day life in South Africa was several ways. For one thing, there was actual geographical segregation. It began with forced evacuations of black population, physical removal of black populations and relocation into other areas. It was instituted in the actual prohibition of blacks and people of other non-white races from entering different areas. It was also in place with regards to laws that prohibited marriage between whites and people of other races, particularly blacks, and also a law of supposed morality which prohibited any type of relationship, never mind marriage, between whites and people of other races. And in later years, blacks were actually, their citizenship in South Africa was actually revoked, and they were given, instead they had like these free states, these autonomies or whatever, not really autonomies as they were a part of South Africa and governed by South Africa, called Bantustans. So those were areas that were supposedly governed by blacks and were for blacks only, and within those areas you could maybe equate those to ghettos or something, but they weren't. They were bigger, and they weren't really ghettos in the sense that they had stuff there, but they didn't have a South African citizenship, and that's about that. They also had a very strict code of like, they codified what races were in South Africa. So you had whites, blacks, Indians, and coloreds, and each one had like different rules that except for whites, who were free. Well, again, not really free, because they were, for example, prohibited from marrying blacks, etc. So that is apartheid. It is considered to be one of the greatest, or maybe, I don't know if great, but one of the great atrocities of human history, and rightly so. But is Israel an apartheid state? This is the point where those of you who might think me a right-winger will be disappointed, or I don't know. I can't give a straightforward answer, because those are things that require a bit more deliberation. I will say this, I don't think Israel is an apartheid state, for one thing, because, as I said on the previous episode, I am of the mind that things are never equal, rather different. And in that sense, Israel is not an apartheid state, and I'll go into further detail. So for one thing, within what is legally Israel is not an apartheid state. Is there equality in Israel within what is legally Israel? No. As I said before, there's a 20% of the Israeli populace is Arabs, and there is no law that denotes them as second-class citizens, but when you look at actual policy, you see that, well, it's a bit murky, and no, they're not treated as really equals. Nothing close to apartheid at all, but not equal. The government does not spend half as much on Arab townships and cities as they do on Jewish ones. Policing is problematic, more than, like, you know, more often than not, Arab townships are severely lacking in policing. The quality of education is not as high in Arab cities as it is in Jewish ones. But Arab Israelis are permitted to vote, permitted to work at almost anything that they want, almost anything, because as far as the military, etc., it's beginning to change. There are more Arab Israelis who go into the army, but it is not a common thing, and they are often pretty much ostracized from their community unless they have a really strongly pro-Israel core family to back them up. And you could ostensibly succeed as a Arab Israeli within Israel, but you'll certainly have your work cut out for you, and there's no doubt about that. Most of this discrimination is on the, well, rather personal level. So again, there aren't any really rules in place. There is policy and there's bigotry. So that's not apartheid. It's far, far from being optimal, to say the very least, but it's not apartheid in any sense. But that's within Israel. The place where there is a case to be made is the West Bank, the Palestinian territories. Gaza is a different thing altogether, but as far as the Palestinian territories, there is a case to be made, and let's look at it. So, whereas Israeli Arabs or Palestinians with an Israeli ID, as some of them consider themselves, are subject to Israeli law. Again, on the actual level of it, it might be discriminatory against them, but it's not codified as such. Their brothers in the West Bank are subject to martial law. That is, in those areas where martial law is in place. That is not in all of the West Bank, but in some areas. What do I mean? back in the 90s, Israel signed the Oslo Accords with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, which later became the Fatah, the no, rather that is the Fatah, but later became the Palestinian Authority. So they signed these accords, with the accords being essentially a tiered plan that should have culminated with peace, essentially. So part of the plan was to separate the West Bank into several areas, different areas, which have different rule. And so there were areas that were Palestinian only, areas that are under Israeli law or Israeli rule, and areas that have a mixed population. And the plan was that it should have outlined which areas were to be which areas would have the Jewish population there removed first, and then a gradual removal of settlements, with the end result being peace. Now, this did not happen, obviously, but we still have this separation of geographical areas within the West Bank. So we still have this, in that sense, it's maybe similar to the idea of Bantustans, those areas that are fully under Palestinian rule, and then there are those areas that have a mixed population where Palestinians are under Israeli martial law, and they are not Israeli citizens and are not afforded equal rights with the settlers there. But what is are the is the situation similar really to what was in South Africa? I don't think so. For one thing, again, racism is rampant, and neither population is fond of the other, but there are no laws on the Israeli side of things prohibiting couples, for example. So Arab Jewish couples, or relationships. It's certainly frowned upon, and you'll get absurd amounts of hate, and either if they want to marry, then it has to either be outside of Israel in a place where you have some kind of civil arrangement that doesn't have anything to do with religion, or one partner in the relationship has to convert, and yes, in the case of Palestinians living in the West Bank, they probably won't be able to marry a Jew and become Israeli citizens. In fact, there have also been problems with Palestinians living in the West Bank marrying with Palestinians carrying Israeli citizenship. It has happened. It probably will continue to happen, but it's not that simple. So, are things in the West Bank an apartheid? Yes and no. No, because again, it's a different animal. It really is. It is bad. It is beyond bad. I've called the occupation on this podcast a moral monstrosity. I'll do it again. But it's different. The equation is helpful as a thought experiment, maybe, but just spouting it isn't really. And being able to point out the differences is also pretty important. Why is it a different animal, though? Why am I insisting that instead of hosting Israeli Apartheid Week, they just call it the occupation? First off, I'm against calling it apartheid because it's demagoguery. It's lazy, it's branding. And again, I don't feel like it's the occupation is moral in any sense, but it's different. It's different because of several things. Because of the populations involved. Whites in South Africa came there as a colonialist project. I know that people like to throw the term colonialism a lot these days, and a lot of they love to lob the term at Israel. But Israel is essentially non-colonialist. Israel is not expanding. And Israel is not the satellite of any nation in the world. there are intellectually lazy people who would say Israel is the 51st state of the United States or something. It isn't. It's nothing alike to America. And if you follow Israel-American relationships at all, you see that we share interests, but it's not. Israel is an ally to the United States. It's not beholden to the United States, and neither is the United States beholden to. You get the point. And Jews are not to the area of Israel what Europeans were to South Africa. Some of you again might go into this whole how long is too long debate about Jews not being in Israel for 2,000 years, which is wrong. But okay, they weren't sovereigns of this area for thousands of years, so why do they deserve the right to come back? I feel it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because they are here, and on the plus side, I don't believe in deserving, really. I believe in morality, certainly, but it is what it is. We are here, and we do have a connection to this land. So in that too, Israel is unlike South Africa. It is also unlike South Africa because the nature of the relationship between the two populations. In South Africa, it began with, yes, a war of conquest and also slave trade. In Israel, it's war. Now, the Israeli government is not at war with the Palestinian Authority, but it is, in a sense, in war with the Palestinian people. Now, yes, the Palestinian people are supposedly represented by the Palestinian Authority, but they really aren't. You can see that by the very fact that the Gaza Strip, for example, is not ruled by the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas, the ruling party of the Gaza Strip, has a strong followership in the West Bank as well. And Hamas is certainly at war with Israel. So, a substantial part of the Palestinian people are at war with Israel. And this war is also religiously motivated. Religion had some things to do with the abhorrent treatment of blacks in Africa. A verse from Genesis laid the foundation for the subjugation and enslavement of blacks throughout history by Christians and Muslims. But apartheid was at the bottom of things sheer racism. Here, there is racism, no doubt about that, but it is laced with religious ideology, as well as nationalism on both sides of things. None of this excuses the occupation, but maybe helps you a bit to understand just how different it is from apartheid South Africa. Call it what it is. The Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. It's bad enough. Next episode, I'll be discussing another oft-repeated demagoguery, which is one I'll have a lot less tolerance towards. That of genocide. And with this teaser, let me wish you an awesome week. See you later, guys.